A big thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this week's video. If you need a website or a domain, go to squarespace.com/James for 10% off your first purchase. Hello everybody, I hope you're all well and welcome to today's video. I have had a cold for a couple of weeks and haven't been able to breathe through my nose, so I thought that'd be annoying in today's video, and therefore I decided to put a bowl of hot water and vapor rub on my desk, children's vapor rub, because I couldn't find the adult one. But even so, I think I've put too much in, because I now feel like I can breathe through my eyes. Move that over there, I think. Bit strong. Anyway, photography. So, recently, I feel like I have developed a theory. It's maybe a bit strong. It's more of a realization than an active thought. But it's this. I think the best places to go for improving your photography, regardless of what your photography is, whether you like to photograph mountains or moles or marketing managers, whatever. I think the best places to go are big cities. And in this video, I'm going to explain why. Honestly, my eyes, I'll take this out, I think.
I don't know if you ever get the feeling as a photographer that you've been stood somewhere for a bit too long. But I have that now. I've been stood watching dogs in Central Park in what is a lovely scene, but I can feel the eyeballs on me now, some of them human, so maybe I should move on. Although I'm not doing anything wrong. It's quite nice being in the sun.
So most places look pretty good in those conditions, and by those conditions I of course mean golden hour. The light is obviously golden, everything's very soft, the fall off in the shadows is wonderful. It's just a really nice time to be out taking photos, regardless of where you are. The problem comes outside of golden hour. If you're shooting in the middle of the day, the sun is high in the sky, you've got very harsh shadows, it's tricky sometimes to be shooting in nature, for instance, where there are no straight lines, and therefore the shadows are all really messy, everything's very harsh, exposing is tricky if you want detail in the highlights and the shadows. But in a city, there are buildings, and therefore there are straight lines, and therefore there are uniform shadows. And they can work great for taking photos.
This is quite a cool spot. I mean, I can't tell you where I am because I can't see the street corner, but I was here the other day with Sean, and it proved quite fruitful. Basically, there's just a streak of light right across the road, and that's really good. There's also a reflection just here, and behind me there's a parking lot with a nice streak of light on it too. So, very good place to stand, I think. I mean, there's loads of these in particularly the financial district, as far as I can work out, with the early morning light. But this one seems particularly good. I feel like any time I shoot in a city like this, I always end up with ethical questions about what you shouldn't and shouldn't shoot. I mean, for me, there's lots of stuff that I would just never photograph. Homeless people, people who quite clearly don't look well in some way. But there was a guy just then who just came and sat down in the middle of the street. And I don't think he was unwell. He just looked like he wanted to sit down. And his back was to me, so I think that's okay. But yeah, there's always kind of middle ground as well, where you're not completely sure whether you should be shooting someone. To each their own, I guess. But, oh, the light this morning. Look at this.
So yeah, in a city, doesn't matter how harsh the light gets, you can keep shooting. But what about in really flat light? What about if you've basically got a massive softbox in the sky? Well, as I tried to demonstrate in last week's video when I went to Coney Island, flat light can work fantastically if you're shooting in places with massive blocks of colour, because then the light isn't competing with your subject to try and become a subject, but instead it's helping your subject shine. Now that isn't just true of cities. There are lots of places that look fantastic in flat light, and in fact it's probably my favourite kind of light to shoot in for that reason. But in big cities, you'll probably have the biggest diversity of options in terms of where to shoot in that kind of light versus anywhere else. And therefore, just as with harsh light, I think in flat light, cities are probably the best place to be if the goal is to be using your camera all day long. But what about if it's sleeting? What about if it's just miserable, wet, horrible snow, sideways rain, no visibility? Nah. Well then cities I think are probably the best place to be then as well. Maybe woodland, obviously, but the diversity that you'll find in cities probably trumps that, I think. But what about when there's no light at all? Nighttime, basically. Well, I think big cities, they're the place to be at nighttime as well. And obviously astrophotographers will contest that. But in big cities, you don't need clear skies. Now the point I'm trying to make here from my visit to New York isn't that if you're a wildlife photographer, for instance, that you should scrap your wildlife photography trips and your time in hides and instead go to New York City. It's not what I'm suggesting. What I am saying though is that if you like to shoot a range of things, or if you're looking to improve your photography as fast as you possibly can, then I think big cities is the place to do that, because the conditions do not matter in a big city. There will always be something to shoot, and any time that you've got your camera in hand and you're actively taking photos is time that you're improving as a photographer. And on top of that, in big cities, you're working in absolute chaos where things are constantly changing, nothing stays the same for more than a few seconds, and therefore you're learning to work quickly as well. And so even if you're a landscape photographer who sets up their tripod for no less than an hour at a time in one place, there is no doubt that it will benefit you to learn how to shoot quickly and to capture fleeting moments. And so again, if you like to be up mountains taking photos and that is your pastime, I'm not suggesting you scrap that and go to a big city. But it's worth keeping in mind that any trips to big cities can be really fruitful, and if you have an itch to try photography in big cities, you should absolutely do it. And for me, even though big cities are not my first choice in terms of somewhere to go to take photos, I'm super pleased that I went to New York, and I'll definitely be making the effort to go to other big cities in future, purely because you stand the chance of improving your photography so much faster than any other kind of place that I can think of. Yeah, so hopefully that was useful. I'm just going to get my bowl again. Also a big thank you to the sponsor of this week's video, Squarespace. I've just put a blog post online about my trip to New York with some of my favourite photos, so go and check that out. And like all things I do on Squarespace, blogging is super simple, but if you're not interested in having your own blog, perhaps you want your own portfolio, maybe you want your own online store, maybe you want somewhere to send newsletters from, maybe you want a place where people can book appointments for your services, whatever you might need a website for, Squarespace has got you covered. And yeah, I've had my website for 7 or 8 years, I absolutely love it, and I couldn't recommend Squarespace enough. This, on the other hand, I'm not sure I would recommend. Anyway, if you would like to check out Squarespace, then you can do so for free by going to squarespace.com to start a free trial. And after that, if you'd like to make a purchase, just go to squarespace.com/James for 10% off your first purchase. And I'm going to have to move that again because that's... no. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. I'll see you next week when hopefully I can breathe properly. Oh!